When my stepmother publicly announced she was selling my late mother's house to teach us ungrateful kids a lesson about family responsibility, I waited for her to finish, then calmly revealed that I'd been paying the property taxes for 3 years because Momsville made me the legal owner. Before I dive into this story of family deception and the most satisfying legal revenge imaginable, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever dealt with a step-parent who tried to erase your biological parent's legacy, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of justice served through proper documentation. My name is Claire, I'm 31 years old, and this story begins with my mother's death 3 years ago and ends with the most public humiliation my stepmother could have never seen coming. What happened in between taught me that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply telling the truth at exactly the right moment. My mother, Catherine, died unexpectedly from a heart attack at age 58. She'd been married to my father for 35 years and had raised 3 children: me, my older brother Jake, and my younger sister Emma. We were a close family, centered around the beautiful Victorian house my mother had inherited from her own parents. The house on Maple Street wasn't just our family home, it was Mom's pride and joy. She'd spent 20 years restoring original hardwood floors, replanting the gardens her grandmother had designed, and maintaining every detail of the 1920s architecture. Mom often said the house held 4 generations of family memories and would someday belong to her children. 6 months after Mom's funeral, my father shocked us all by announcing his engagement to Patricia Williams, a woman he'd met through his grief counseling group. Patricia was 52, divorced, and had 2 adult children of her own. She'd lost her husband 2 years earlier and had connected with my father over their shared experience of sudden loss. "It's too soon," I told my father during a difficult conversation about his engagement. "Mom hasn't been gone a year." "Your mother wouldn't want me to be alone," he replied, using the argument that would become his standard justification for every decision Patricia influenced. "She'd want me to be happy." My siblings and I weren't against my father finding companionship, but Patricia's approach to joining our family was problematic from the beginning. Instead of respecting Mom's memory and our grief process, she seemed determined to replace every trace of my mother with her own preferences. Within weeks of moving into our childhood home, Patricia had redecorated Mom's bedroom, donated most of her clothes without asking us, and begun referring to the house as our home rather than acknowledging its history with our family. "We need to make this space ours," she told my father, apparently unaware that we could hear her from the next room. "It's not healthy to live in a shrine to your first wife." The most painful change was Patricia's treatment of Mom's garden. My mother had spent decades cultivating roses, peonies, and the herb garden that had been her sanctuary. Patricia hired landscapers to remove everything and install a modern, low-maintenance design that required no knowledge or care of the plants Mom had loved. "It's more practical," Patricia explained when I expressed distress about the garden destruction. "Your mother's gardening hobby was too time-consuming. This design will be much easier to maintain." But Patricia's most disturbing behavior was her systematic attempt to rewrite our family history. She began telling people that my father had been unhappy in his first marriage, that our mother had been difficult and controlling, and that their relationship represented his first experience of real love. She shared these revisionist stories at dinner parties, family gatherings, and even at church, gradually poisoning people's memories of my mother. "Your father tells me he never felt appreciated before," Patricia confided to my aunt during one family barbecue, loud enough for several relatives to hear. "It's so rewarding to see him finally experience what marriage should be like." My siblings and I found these comments devastating. Our parents had been genuinely happy together for 35 years. They'd weathered normal marital challenges but had always been affectionate, supportive partners who shared interests, values, and a deep love for their children. Patricia's rewriting of their relationship wasn't just hurtful, it was factually wrong. But my father, who seemed to be experiencing some kind of midlife crisis combined with grief-induced poor judgment, allowed these narratives to continue unchallenged. The situation reached a crisis point 18 months after Patricia moved into Mom's house. During a family dinner, Patricia announced that she and my father were planning extensive renovations to modernize the Victorian house. Plans included removing original architectural details, updating the kitchen by destroying the butler's pantry Mom had restored, and converting Mom's art studio into Patricia's home office. "This house needs to reflect the people who actually live here now," Patricia said, looking directly at me. "It's time to stop living in the past." "This house is part of our family history," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom spent 20 years restoring these original features." "Your mother's restoration work was amateur," Patricia said dismissively. "We're hiring real professionals to do things properly." That night, I called my siblings to discuss our options. None of us lived in the house anymore, and my father seemed completely under Patricia's influence. We felt helpless to protect our mother's legacy or the home that held our childhood memories. But I decided to do something I should have done immediately after Mom's death. I thoroughly researched her estate planning documents. Mom had always been organized and methodical about financial planning. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for 30 years and understood the importance of proper documentation. Through Dad's engagement, I realized I needed to understand exactly what legal arrangements she'd made for the house and other assets. I spent a weekend going through Mom's home office, which Patricia had been planning to convert but hadn't yet touched. In a filing cabinet behind Mom's desk, I found a folder labeled Estate Planning, updated 2019. Inside were documents that changed everything. My mother had created a comprehensive estate plan that included a will, trust documents, and property transfers that she'd executed 2 weeks before her death. According to these documents, while my father retained the right to live in the house for his lifetime, legal ownership had been transferred to her 3 children. The house on Maple Street legally belonged to Jake, Emma, and me. Mom had also established a trust fund for property maintenance, taxes, and improvements, funded by her life insurance policy. Trust was designed to ensure the house could be properly maintained regardless of my father's financial circumstances. Most importantly, the documents specified that any major renovations or changes to the house required approval from all 3 children, and that if my father remarried, his new spouse would have no ownership rights or decision-making authority regarding the property. My mother had anticipated exactly what was happening and had legally protected her children's inheritance and the house she'd spent decades restoring. I immediately contacted the estate attorney whose name appeared on the documents. Martha Chen had been Mom's lawyer for over a decade and confirmed that all the paperwork was properly executed and legally binding. "Your mother was very thorough," Martha explained during our meeting. She updated these documents after her first heart attack in 2019, when she realized she needed to protect the house from potential future complications. Did my father know about these arrangements? She discussed some aspects with him, but not the specific details about remarriage protections. Catherine was concerned that discussing those provisions might cause marital conflict, so she handled the legal work privately. I learned that I, as the oldest child, had been designated as the primary trustee responsible for property maintenance and tax payments. For the past 18 months, the trust had been automatically paying the property taxes and insurance from Mom's life insurance funds. I had legal authority over the house that Patricia was planning to renovate, and she had no idea. I shared this information with Jake and Emma, who were initially shocked and then relieved that Mom had protected our inheritance. We decided to let Patricia continue making renovation plans until she'd publicly committed to changes we could then legally block, maximizing her embarrassment and our father's realization of how thoroughly he'd been misled. Perfect opportunity came at Dad's 60th birthday party, which Patricia had insisted on hosting at the house. Patricia had invited 40 guests, including extended family, longtime family friends, and several couples from their church. She'd planned an elaborate dinner party that would showcase her role as the new lady of the house and her plans for improving the property. During dinner, Patricia stood up to give a toast that was ostensibly about my father but was actually about her own vision for their future. "Robert and I have been so happy in this beautiful home," she began, gesturing around Mom's restored dining room. "And we're excited to share our renovation plans with all of you." She spent 10 minutes detailing the changes she intended to make, describing Mom's restoration work as dated and impractical, and explaining how professional renovators would finally bring this house into the 21st century. The guests listened politely, but I could see discomfort on the faces of longtime family friends who remembered how much the house had meant to my mother and how lovingly she'd restored every detail. "We know Catherine put effort into this house," Patricia continued, "but sometimes you have to be willing to let go of the past and embrace change. Robert and I aren't going to live in a museum to his first wife." Casual dismissal of my mother's 20-year restoration project, delivered to a room full of people who had watched Mom work on the house for decades, was breathtakingly cruel. "Of course, we understand this might be emotional for Robert's children," Patricia added, looking at me with false sympathy. "But they've made it clear through their absence that they don't really care about maintaining family property. None of them visit regularly or contribute to upkeep costs." This was a lie. I'd been visiting the house every Sunday for 18 months, often when Patricia was out, so I could spend time with Dad without her interference. My siblings visited regularly as well, but Patricia had begun scheduling activities during our typical visit times to limit our access. "Since the children obviously aren't interested in family responsibility," Patricia concluded, "Robert and I feel free to make the changes we believe will make this house a proper home for our future together." The speech was designed to position Patricia as the reasonable adult making practical decisions while portraying my siblings and me as ungrateful children who had abandoned our family responsibilities. After Patricia finished her toast, several guests offered polite congratulations while shooting sympathetic looks in my direction. They could sense something was wrong with Patricia's narrative but didn't have enough information to challenge it publicly. I waited until Patricia had basked in the attention for a few minutes, then stood up. "Thank you, Patricia, for sharing your renovation plans," I said calmly. "I think this is a perfect time to clarify a few details about the house ownership and maintenance responsibilities you mentioned." Patricia looked pleased, apparently assuming I was going to publicly support her plans or apologize for my family's supposed neglect. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began reading from the legal documents Martha had emailed me. According to the estate planning documents Mom completed 2 weeks before her death, legal ownership of this house was transferred to her 3 children. "Patricia, you have no ownership rights or legal authority to make renovation decisions." The room went completely silent. Patricia's confident smile faltered. I continued reading. "The trust Mom established has been automatically paying all property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs for the past 18 months. The trust fund was designed specifically to ensure family property would be maintained without burdening Dad financially or requiring contributions from his children." Tricia was now staring at me with obvious panic. My father looked confused. Mom also specified that any major renovations require approval from all 3 children, and that Dad's remarriage wouldn't affect the property ownership or give his new spouse decision-making authority over changes to the house. I looked around the room at 40 guests who now understood that Patricia had been lying about both the ownership situation and our family's involvement in property maintenance. "I've been visiting every Sunday for 18 months, Patricia. Not sure why you told everyone we never come around. And I've been working with Mom's contractor to maintain the original architectural features exactly as she restored them." The silence in the room was deafening. Patricia was opening and closing her mouth without making a sound. My father was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time in 2 years. "Martha Chen, Mom's estate attorney, is available to explain the legal documentation to anyone who has questions," I concluded. "But the bottom line is that this house belongs to Mom's children, and we intend to preserve her restoration work exactly as she intended." I sat down and resumed eating my dinner as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The aftermath was immediate and devastating for Patricia's credibility. My Aunt Rebecca, Mom's sister, was the first to speak. "Catherine spent 20 years working on this house. Of course, she'd want to protect her children's inheritance." My father's longtime friend, Tom Morrison, added, "I helped Catherine with some of the restoration work. She was meticulous about preserving the historical details. It would be a crime to destroy what she built. One by one, the guests who had known my mother began sharing memories of her dedication to the house and her pride in the restoration work Patricia had dismissed as amateur and dated. Patricia tried to salvage the situation. "I had no idea Catherine had made these arrangements. Robert told me the house was part of his estate." "You've been living here for 18 months, I replied evenly. "Did you never wonder who was paying the property taxes?" This question highlighted another lie in Patricia's narrative. If she and my father were responsible for property maintenance, they would have known about the tax payments. The fact that she didn't know about them proved that she'd never actually been contributing to household expenses as she'd claimed. My father finally found his voice. "Claire, I didn't know your mother had transferred ownership. She mentioned updating her estate plan, but not the specific arrangements. She protected your right to live here for your lifetime, Dad. But she also protected her children's inheritance and the house she spent 2 decades restoring." The party effectively ended after my revelation. Guests began leaving within 30 minutes, but not before several people privately thanked me for standing up for Mom's legacy and expressed their relief that the house would be preserved. Patricia disappeared into the bedroom and didn't return to say goodbye to any of the guests. The conversation I had with my father the next day was the most honest discussion we'd had since his engagement. "Claire, I owe you an apology," he began. "I've been so focused on moving forward that I forgot to honor your mother's wishes and your family's feelings. Dad, Patricia has been telling people that Mom was difficult and that you were unhappy in your marriage. She's been rewriting history in ways that aren't true. I know. I should have stopped that immediately. Your mother was a wonderful wife and partner. I was happy with her for 35 years. Then why did you let Patricia say those things?" My father was quiet for a long time before answering. "Because it was easier than dealing with her jealousy about Catherine's memory." Patricia struggled with feeling like she was competing with a ghost. "I thought if I let her establish her own narrative, she'd eventually feel more secure. Instead, she tried to erase Mom completely." "Yes, and that was wrong of me to allow." Over the following weeks, the full extent of Patricia's deception became clear. She had been telling my father that his children were resentful of his remarriage and didn't want to visit the house anymore. She'd been scheduling activities during our typical visit times and then reporting to Dad that we'd stopped coming around. She had also been intercepting some of our phone calls and visits, creating artificial distance between Dad and his children that she could then use to justify her claims about our lack of family involvement. Most manipulatively, she had been encouraging my father to believe that moving forward from grief meant erasing reminders of his first marriage, rather than finding ways to honor Mom's memory while building new happiness. The renovation plans were part of a larger strategy to eliminate my mother's presence from the house and establish Patricia as the primary influence in Dad's life. My public revelation of the estate planning documents didn't just stop the renovations, it exposed Patricia's systematic dishonesty and manipulation. Within a month, my father had asked Patricia to move out. "I can't trust someone who would lie about my children and disrespect my late wife's memory," he explained to me. I thought Patricia was helping me heal, but she was actually trying to rewrite my history. Tricia's departure was swift and ungracious. She took furniture she'd brought to the house, but also attempted to take several items that had belonged to my mother. When I pointed out that Mom's belongings were part of the estate, Patricia accused me of being vindictive and unable to accept change. "I'm protecting Mom's legacy," I replied. "Something you never had any intention of doing. The house renovations never happened. Instead, my siblings and I worked with Mom's original contractor to complete some maintenance projects she'd been planning before her death. We restored the garden using her original landscaping plans and turned her art studio into a family archive where we preserve photos, documents, and mementos from 4 generations of family history. My father, freed from Patricia's influence, has reconnected with his children and begun processing his grief in healthier ways. He's attending individual therapy and has stopped trying to erase reminders of his marriage to Mom. I realize now that I was trying to avoid grief instead of working through it," he told me recently. Patricia promised that if I let go of the past completely, I wouldn't have to feel sad anymore. But that meant letting go of the good memories too. Dad now talks about Mom regularly and has resumed some of the traditions and activities they'd shared. He's also become involved in maintaining the house again, working alongside us to preserve what Mom built rather than trying to replace it. The legal documentation Mom had prepared turned out to be even more comprehensive than we'd initially realized. In addition to protecting the house, she'd established education funds for any future grandchildren, charitable donations to causes she'd supported, and detailed instructions for preserving family documents and photographs. Your mother thought through every possible scenario, Martha Chen explained when we met to finalize the estate administration. She wanted to make sure her children were protected and her legacy was preserved, regardless of what happened after her death. The most moving discovery was a letter Mom had written to each of her children, to be delivered only if circumstances required us to invoke the estate protection she'd established. My letter read in part, "If you're reading this, it means someone tried to take away the home and legacy I built for you. I hope you understand that protecting your inheritance wasn't about money, it was about preserving the love, memories, and family history that make you who you are. Don't let anyone convince you that honoring the past means you can't embrace the future. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand up for what matters." The letter also contains specific instructions about maintaining the house, continuing family traditions, and supporting Dad through grief while protecting our own emotional well-being. "I know it might seem like I didn't trust your father," Mom had written, "but I know how grief can cloud judgment and how vulnerable people can be manipulated during difficult times. These legal protections aren't about not trusting him, they're about making sure no one can take advantage of his grief to hurt our children." Her foresight had been remarkable. She'd anticipated exactly what had happened and had provided both legal protection and emotional guidance for navigating the situation. 2 years after Patricia's departure, our family has found a new equilibrium that honors both Mom's memory and Dad's right to build a future. Dad is dating someone new, but this time he's chosen a woman who respects his family history and wants to build relationships with his children rather than erase his past. The house on Maple Street remains exactly as Mom intended, a preserve of family history and a gathering place for the people she loved. My siblings and I have maintained her restoration work and continued her gardens, and Dad has resumed his own projects around the property. We host regular family dinners in Mom's restored dining room, and Dad often shares stories about the work they did together on the house. Instead of trying to forget the past, he's learned to integrate his memories of Mom with his current life in ways that feel healthy and authentic. The most satisfying outcome isn't that we stopped Patricia's renovation plans, it's that we preserved something irreplaceable that Mom had built with 20 years of love and effort. The house stands as proof that some legacies are worth protecting and that proper planning can ensure your values survive even when you can't. If you're dealing with family members who are trying to erase a loved one's memory or take control of inheritances that don't belong to them, remember that legal documentation is your most powerful protection. Estate planning isn't just about money, it's about preserving the values, traditions, and legacies that define your family identity. Sometimes the best revenge against people who try to rewrite history is simply having the paperwork that proves what really happened. If you enjoyed this story of family legacy protection and legal justice served, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of people who stood up for what mattered most. Share your own experiences with protecting family legacies in the comments below. Have you ever had to fight to preserve something important that a family member was trying to destroy? Remember that honoring the past doesn't mean you can't embrace the future, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone's memory is to preserve what they built with their own hands. Thank you for listening to my story of family legacy and the power of proper estate planning. Sometimes the most important revenge is simply making sure the truth survives.